Welcome to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to other people about their stories with VEDS or vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Staying Connected. This is your host, Katie, and before we get into the show, I want to remind you that the views, information, and opinions in these podcasts are those of the individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of the Marfan Foundation. The Marfan Foundation is not responsible for and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in them, nor does the information constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This show is not produced by or affiliated with the Marfan Foundation or the VEDS movement. In our last episode, we talked to Sarah Phillip, who was diagnosed with VEDS in 2020 after her sister passed away from complications after pregnancy. In today's episode, we're going to touch base with a prior guest, Jeremias Tays, who was on the podcast back in 2019. He's going to share his experience and insights over the last 3 years, as well as his experience with a bowel perforation that occurred in November 2021. Before we go over to the interview, if you want to support this show, consider joining my Patreon. For a few dollars a month, you can make sure this show continues to reach people around the world with real-life stories about VEDS. You can join the Patreon at patreon.com/translucent1, and you can also support the show by sharing this podcast with people you know to help us raise awareness of VEDS around the world together. Thank you so much for your support, and a huge thanks to my current patrons who have already been supporting the show. My top-tier patrons are included in the episode show notes. All right, let's go to the interview. Hey, Jeremias, welcome back to the podcast. It's been like 3 years since we did our interview back in 2019, and I'm so excited to have you back. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for having me again. It's been an interesting time since the last, I guess 3 years.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that. So you want to introduce yourself to people who don't know you yet?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jeremias. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm affected with VEDS. I've got two little boys, 12 and 9, who are both affected with VEDS as well too. Been part of the community for some time now, and also invested in some of the other the VEDS movement and stuff. So do some work with them.
Cool. Well, I'm so excited to have this discussion because I feel like, I went back and listened to the episode that we did back in 2019, and I think that we were in Nashville maybe for the VEDS collaborative meeting. Or we were in Houston. I don't know which one because we got together a couple times in 2019. But we were so giggly and just happy. And did you go back and listen to it?
Yeah. No, it was actually Nashville where we did it. I remember sitting in that back little room, and it's fun. It was totally just like spur of the moment. I think it was last minute thing. Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think personally, I'm just I try to be a happy-go-lucky person. I like to joke. I don't take myself too seriously, and laugh about dumb things or whatever. So yeah, it was a great time. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it really was. And it was such an interesting moment in time to look back on for me because so that would be August 2019. So it was before the VEDS movement. We were at the VEDS collaborative meeting. We were talking about designing a clinical trial. There was mice data that was coming out that has now kind of come full circle. Do you want to talk about that at all? How does it feel for you? What's the difference for you between the last 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, man, 3 years ago, things have dramatically changed in our community. We've got I think 2 trials that one of them is kicked off and one of them is about to kick off. I think at the time, yeah, just we were all just new, just trying to figure out what VEDS is, and what these doctors are studying and trying to do for our community. And so, yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear that scientific information. I mean, even if I personally, or maybe you or a lot of people didn't really totally get all the science behind it, but it's still great to hear all that information.
Yeah, and I think that was the first time that the mouse data was presented, and it's the same, that was the origin point, I think, for what has now come to be this upcoming ensifentrine trial.
Yeah.
Such an exciting thing.
Yeah, it really is exciting. Yeah, we're super excited to have something that potentially could change, the course of eds, and just might have some major impact and give us a better quality of life, and maybe a longer life, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, and so when we talked back then, and I'm not gonna have you redo like your diagnosis and stuff, like I think that has been recorded. So anybody who's not familiar with your story, I encourage you to go and listen to our first interview back in 2019. If there's room in this episode today, I'll be putting it at the end of this episode, so you don't have to go dig for it or anything like that. But back then, you were describing your history, and you hadn't had a major life-threatening event. And I know both of us last year had life threatening events. Do you want to talk about yours?
yeah, so it's back in November. Just started like kind of any day, right? Just logged onto my computer for work, and it's kind of having like just some subtle pain in my abdomen. Is thought it was just whatever, something, just kind of normal things. You get pain from time to time. And so it's slow enough, sure enough, as the day kind of progressed, that pain started to get a little bit more, it's definitely more present, or it's starting to hurt a lot more. And so I ended up like logging off, and my wife was kind of monitoring me and stuff throughout the day. And so kind of just logged off and just kind of laid down in bed for a bit. And I think I had like a low grade fever at that point in time. And so my wife was, constantly just kind of checking on me periodically. And, I was just really not feeling well at all. And then it's probably about 4 or 5 o'clock, I think, in the evening. And I just knew something was off. It just, things were just different, the feeling of it. And so I ended up just telling her, like, I think we need to go to the ER. And so we ended up going to the ER here in Round Rock. And yeah, it was just things kind of progressed from there. We were luckily able to get back pretty quickly, and got a CAT scan, and it came back that they saw like what's called like a Meckel's diverticulitis.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, like what first kind of the first line of pass, or the first line of defense, I guess, for something like that, was they started injecting me with like antibiotics and stuff. And they said, sometimes these things can kind of heal themselves. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to start you on a course of antibiotics, and then we'll kind of see what goes from there. So I had doctors coming down and stuff, and they were basically, they said we can admit you, and then we'll kind of monitor you here. And so also they said, like, worst case scenario, we've got to do surgery or whatever. And so at this time, like, we're already kind of communicating with my primary doctors in Houston, just to kind of get their input and get them kind of in the conversation. And at this point, like, I had already they were pumping me already full of like pain meds and stuff like that. So I really hate pain meds, but yeah, so I was already feeling, kind of out of it. And so lucky, my wife was there, advocating for me during that time. And yeah, the surgeon kind of came down and was kind of giving us, some initial consultation. And immediately we just knew something was kind of off. Like, we just, like, he was, as most doctors with vets, you kind of run into some situation, like, they're just kind of arrogant, and so we tried to explain vets to him. And we even got like one of our doctors to see if he could call them and consult with them. And it was really arrogant. Like, he just like didn't want to even like really talk to them. But he ended up doing it after some time, after us, kind of
Pestering.
talking. Yeah, exactly. Basically, yeah,
Maybe that's not the right word. Persevering,
yeah,
right?
we were pushing him very, very strongly. And so so yeah, so in this situation, right, we're talking to the surgeon, and we finally got him on the phone with our doctors that know veds. And even after that, it just like seemed like he was off. He was being really rude to my wife. And and my wife stepped away for a bit. And he was like kind of almost like, I remember this really, really vividly. But he was talking to me directly, and he was like almost like trying to sell me, like, I'll do the surgery, I can do it, you're going to be okay, whatever. It was really just like kind of awkward, honestly. And
Yeah.
so
What was the surgery that he wanted to do?
basically, yeah, so they were going to have to remove that Meckel's, it's like I don't know if you know what Meckel's diverticulitis is. I don't, I kind of know a little bit now from after the fact. But basically what it is, it's like tissue, whenever you're born, like part, usually on a normal person, like that tissue, it's basically like the umbilical cord. It's supposed to like go back and kind of like seed back into your intestines or
Mm-hmm.
cord. But in certain cases, I think it just doesn't do that. And so you still have like this pouch that sits there. So I guess things can get like trapped in there. And in my
Okay.
case, that's what they were seeing. Something was there, and it was inflamed or whatever. And so, yeah, my wife, Rachel, came back from outside, and we just kind of both looked at each other and we're like, I don't know what we're gonna do. We're like in this situation, and we've always had this plan, course of action. What are we gonna do? And
Right.
something happens, and yeah, uh, part of us were like, I think we're okay. We can probably stick around here and we'll be okay. And then I think after kind of just talking back and forth, we were like, we got to figure out how to get to Houston. We just knew something was different, right? Something was really off. And so what we ended up saying was like, we want to be transferred to Houston, to a higher level of care, which we actually found out you can do. And so that's really important. But definitely want to emphasize that for anybody that's listening to this. If you're in a hospital somewhere and you just feel like that's not the right place for you, you can be transferred for higher level of care, get to an actual hospital that is actually can I would say better, but that just can treat your situation more better, I guess, or whatever.
So like a higher level trauma center or
Yeah,
tertiary care center or a university hospital, like something that is different than the one that you're sitting
ex-
at, right?
exactly. Yeah, because this wasn't. I think it was like a level 3 trauma center, so not really a great place that you want to be at, right? And so as soon as we said that, like they wheeled us back into like a holding room, and that's when the ball started really getting rolling. And so yeah, so it was probably a couple hours, it was already like almost getting past like midnight or whatever at this time. So we're both really exhausted at this point, just battling battling the doctors, trying to figure out what the right call is, in this situation. And so sure enough, it's about 12:30, midnight, whatever, past midnight, and the paramedics show up and they start getting me ready to be transported out. And yeah, so I got wheeled out, middle of the night. It's definitely not the best situation. And my wife, wheeled out with me, and we were like, probably should wait because she didn't. It was like a 3-hour drive, and it was already really late at night, and she was tired. I didn't want her to like fall asleep while driving or something. And so she didn't follow. She ended up going home and kind of getting going home to the kids to kind of get them ready for tomorrow to get to come up to Houston. And so yeah, that was an interesting ride to Houston. So yeah, if you've ever been transported in an ambulance, it's a pretty rocky ride in the back, fortunately, and especially with the situation going on, it exacerbated the pain. So anyways, yeah, throughout the ride, kicked off, 3 hours past midnight. We're rolling through like 290 back, dark. It's really dark out there and stuff, and probably like 30 minutes into the ride, like I just started feeling like overwhelming sense of nauseousness just overcame me, and I was like just spinning. And yeah, the paramedic that was back there with me, I was just like, I'm not feeling good at all. I feel like I'm gonna like vomit, and so I was looking for a bag, right? And the last thing I remember is I just like completely just blacked out. And I woke up probably like maybe a few hours later or something, kind of came to, and I was noticed there's another IV in my arm. And like he was just kind of, the paramedic was just kind of like shocked, a little bit kind of like shocked, really. He was just like, I was like, what happened? Where am I at? And he's like, yeah, you just tanked, basically your vitals just tanked, and yeah, just basically lost consciousness, I guess, for a bit of time. And then happened again probably about 20 minutes later, the same thing, this overwhelming sense of nauseousness. Boom, blacked out. And the next thing I realized, like we're already kind of like in Houston, trying to find the ambulance bay for us to get, so they can drop me off or whatever. Came to for a bit, and was having a bit of a conversation with the paramedic, and he was just like, he was just like, I'm really thankful that they sent me, because they were going to send just somebody to sit back here with you that probably wasn't a paramedic. And so yeah, he's like, if that would have happened, they wouldn't have been able to administer like any, kind of medications or things like that. So
So because he was there, he was able to basically revive your vitals.
basically, yeah.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I was very fortunate. It's such a lovely man. I still haven't been able to figure out who he is to this day. I really feel like I need to, just to thank him
Yeah.
and thank the other driver because like they were like sleeping, and they probably, they transported somebody, from up to Houston in the middle of the night. It's probably not a fun thing to do, but he was such a kind person, and yeah, I'm really thankful for them for being there and doing that for me. Anyway, so I get to Houston Memorial Hermann, and I go to the ER and get admitted and get back to a room, and yeah, just that was kind of the next steps. They got me all set up or whatever with IVs and everything. So I had IVs sticking out everywhere. Seems painful after. Oh, and yeah, the next morning, the doctors make their rounds, early in the morning, and so I got to meet some of my team about 6 in the morning, and I'll never forget this. But I met the surgeon, pretty much, did the surgery. It's, I guess saved my life, right? He came in and he was just kind of like, looking over me and whatnot, and he was just kind of trying to see where the pain was and what's kind of the severity of the situation, I guess. And they had scans, and so they saw the Meckles or the Meckel diverticulum, but that's all that they knew, I guess, at the time. So I'll never forget this because it was really, really, really painful. But he did like this. He was like in my abdomen area, and he did like this popping thing, and it was just the most excruciating pain ever. It was just like, and I'm somebody I feel like I have a high pain tolerance. Like I things like that really don't phase me too much, but I'll never forget that. And so whenever he saw my eyes and saw me like gasp, like he was just like, this is an emergency. And so within the hour, I'm sitting there, I got a bunch of people coming in and out of my room, and basically, they put all these documents in front of you, and you got to start signing your life away, basically. And my wife's not even there at the time; she's still back home in Austin. And like, yeah, she's like, I was able to call her and talk to her. I was like, they're going to will me back pretty quickly here, and you're probably not going to make it before that happens. And so, just tell the kids I love them. I love you, and we'll see you. And so there I am, just signing my life away. And yeah, it was really a little stressful, for sure. And I got so anyways, yeah, so within an hour I was, being wheeled back to an OR, and kind of a surreal experience, honestly. If you've ever been rolled back into an ER, it's a little surreal, Um so
And so what kind of surgery did they end up doing?
yeah, so initially they didn't know they were going to go in and do exploratory surgery, right? See what's going on. So that they were going to go in like laparoscopic, less invasive. It was like three keys or three keyholes or something, kind of like what they would do for like gallbladder surgery or something,
Mm-hmm.
just to check in cameras and stuff and see what they can find out in there. And so yeah, I get wheeled back into the room. There's a table. You got like 20 people kind of standing around, all various, nurses, technicians, anesthesiologists, doctors, and it's quite impressive because like they all know about your situation, your case, and just kind of thinking about everybody's got to play a vital part in this whole ordeal, and you're kind of the star of the show, right? You're about to be in the middle of everything, and yeah, from there, just the standard, they basically they tell you what's about to happen, and anesthesiologist puts the little thing over your face, and then count back from 10, and then just blacked out at that point.
Yeah.
Um,
Thankfully, right? Because if you weren't,
yeah,
maybe you
pretty much.
wouldn't have had a good
Pretty
experience.
much, pretty much. So, yeah, from what I can remember, you wake up in the recovery room and you're just very out of it, right? From the anesthesia and just pain meds, whatever. And so,
What did they find?
yeah, so, yeah, they ended up, like I said, they went in and started the exploratory surgery, and then they realized that it was much more severe. And so they ended up having to open me all up, basically a full, abdomen, open up, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what they found was that basically I had like part of my bowel had already like perforated, and that tissue was already like pretty much like necrotic or dying basically at that point. It was dead, some of it, and so they ended up having to do full surgery. They ended up removing like 15 centimeters of my ileum. Of course, like with any VEDS patient, there's always a lot of bleeding, lost a lot of blood during the surgery, and they ended up having to cut more of the actual ileum because of the a lot of the vessels were like just shredding apart, and they were having a lot of problems trying to close things and stop the bleeding. In particular, the mesenteric artery, which I think is like one of the major arteries that feeds like your whole bowel, your intestines, or whatever. They had a lot of issues trying to stop that from bleeding. So the surgery, ended up going like 6 hours or something like that, I believe. So much more longer surgery. Some complications with that, and then another thing that I had heard afterwards was like that it took a little time for me to come out of the anesthesia. Like they were having a problem, they were having some trouble trying to get me breathing again, so they had to intubate me and stuff. After surgery. But yeah, one of the things that was, I guess, a positive of the surgery was that they got really, I guess, they were able to remove the part of the ileum that had turned bad or whatever, septic or whatever, and also another thing I was dealing with that was septic, right, from bowel perforation. And so, but they were able to get a really good when they went to reconnect it. They got a real good seal, and so I was very fortunate, lucky. I didn't have to end up with an ileum, I guess a VAG or something, whatever they call it, an ileum
Right.
bag
Like an
or
ileostomy bag.
yeah. They were able to get a good seal, and they even tested it. Like there's some special dye that they can use, and then they basically run it under, I guess, microscopes or something or scans to tell that there was no leaks or whatever. So
Great.
yeah, I got really lucky in that part. I know a lot of people with VEDS that have surgery like this, they end up with a bag or something in it. That's
Yeah.
definitely much more intense thing, I think, in the long term recovery from that, and just kind of dealing with that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so woke up in recovery, and yeah, it was wheeled back to the back to the room or whatever, and yeah, that's when I saw Rachel for the first time, out of that, and um, yeah, that's kind of just kind of healing after that. The first night was really difficult. Like there was some complications and stuff. They ended up having to give me frozen fresh plasma or something, FFP, I guess is how they
Oh,
say it.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting because like probably like sometime towards the night I just wasn't feeling good at all. And they did some labs or whatever, and I can't remember what they saw. Something to test to see what your blood looks like or whatever, clotting
Mm-hmm.
factors and stuff. And it was not really good. And so they ended up deciding that I had to get FFP. Another thing too that they noticed is potassium was really low, because I guess when you lose so much blood, your body's just in this
Oh,
crazy.
those potassium pills are so gross. Did you
I
have to
think
take the pills or did
no, I think this was all intravenous. I believe it was all
Okay.
through IV or whatever because I couldn't swallow anything at
Yeah.
that time. But yeah, I just remember all these bags looking up, and there's just so much stuff on the hangers or whatever they call them, and
What did all of this feel like for you? Like emotionally, how was this experience?
ooh, I mean, I think initially, like when I was in the actual thing in the moment, right? Like I was just wanted to get the heck out of there, right? As fast as you could. So you just try to like kind of block off the emotional aspect of it and just try to understand that this is a situation that I'm in right now. And just try not to get too emotional. I don't think it's really affected me like as far as like I don't feel like I it was definitely moments where I was definitely like I gotta just I gotta get out of here, out of the situation. But it's kind of the fight or flight mode, I guess, right? You
Yeah.
just want to get out of there. Um, I think now look at it's been almost I guess 10 months or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a pretty positive person. I just kind of see it as something that happened, part of my life, and you just figure out how to move forward. Don't dwell upon things.
Mm-hmm. Has it changed the way that you experience feds?
Yeah, for certain. I mean, like I had seen my kids go through things and obviously, some of close friends, family, whatever, and in the community, go through traumatic situations. And so I think until it happens to you, you really don't, I guess, grasp the severity or the possible outcomes of what vets can do. And so, yeah, definitely, it's definitely made me, um, yeah, it's just more aware, more cautious, I think, gotta, gotta be more careful, with my life.
Yeah. Let's talk about, so you mentioned that you had a plan going
Yeah.
in, like before, you had an emergency plan, basically, you and Rachel did. And that nothing really played out, like it didn't play out the way that you had planned, right? Um,
Yeah.
Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we've had this diagnosis, just about 8 years and stuff. So in that moment, like, we'd always talk about, we feel like we got a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. I mean, really the plan always ends up like we got to figure out how to get to our doctors that understand, what veds is. Yeah, I mean, like in that situation, like, it's just like you always tend to like kind of second guess yourself, I think. And you're like, I think maybe I'll be okay here, right? I think, I'm in a hospital, right? And these are doctors. Um, yeah, I think just one thing I'll say is like if everybody should have a plan for one, but stick to your gut. I think a lot of it is something if you can just sense that something is wrong, go with it. That that could be the difference in life and death.
That's really great advice. And I've talked to other people this season in these interviews that have said similar things about like trusting your instincts and your gut. And sometimes you don't have a choice, right? But in your situation, like you had bad vibes from the surgeon, you didn't quite feel right about the whole thing. And, you luckily had a paramedic in the ambulance with you, so that you can make it to Houston. But I think there is something to be said about trusting your gut for sure.
Yeah, trusting your gut, and also I think in my situation, I think it's a little bit of I don't know, luck, faith, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, right? Just I got lucky. I don't know. God's looking after me. If you're a religious person, I don't know. But like because of the thing is like one of the things that we didn't realize was when we got to Houston, and then all this stuff happened. Like we didn't realize that I had already perforated at that point, so I was already in septic, turning septic, and so I think that if they would have found that on the scans in here in our other hospital here in Round Rock, I think they probably wouldn't have transported me because I probably wasn't stable enough to even be transported. And
Mm,
so, I think a little bit of I'm kind of lucky that they didn't see that on the scans. So, because I did end up in the right place that ultimately ended up, saving my life.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, yeah, so I think there's a little bit of luck in that, and also just us just knowing that we had to stick with our plan and get to where get to Houston.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you made it.
Yeah, me too.
It was great hugging you in in Newport Beach in July at conference. Like it was, I think we both in the last couple of years, certainly with the pandemic and just how chaotic everything was, and then us both having life threatening events. Not like I think it was within 3 or 4 weeks of each other.
Yeah,
Like it
well,
just felt really good to see you, friend.
feelings mutual. I yeah, you don't realize, I guess how much these people, how much everybody that has this condition when you meet them, how much they mean to you. Like, I mean, it's just like an immediate, like, they get it, and
Yeah.
I get it too, and that is really something that's powerful because like you don't you live with this condition on a day to day, and sometimes you feel like you're like you know you don't know what's going to happen, right? But sometimes you also feel like you're the only one, right? Like and you're and and whenever you get to hang out with people that are living with this condition, family members, I'm going to call them family because that's really what
Yeah.
they are. um whenever you get to talk to, even when we do like support groups or whatever, and just see one another's faces and just talk about our, what we're going through at that point in time, it's, you don't really realize how the mental aspect of that, you also need that too. It's not just living in the physical aspect. There's this mental aspect with it. And, just being able to talk to people and, just know that you're in kind of a safe space, I guess, and I mean, I share, I'm pretty open about the veds and pretty open with everybody that I know. And yeah, it's just, I think for me, that's being open is kind of my way to express myself and to also not let things like bother me or bog me down.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So what is advice that you would give to somebody who's just new to this diagnosis or new to the community?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about 3 years ago and where we're at, I mean, there's so many things now. Um, get involved, as soon as, I mean, I don't think there's really much different than I said in the previous podcast, but like, really you've got to be your own advocate. You've got to realize that nobody's going to kind of hold your hand in this whole thing. And so, getting involved in the support groups. There's some amazing support groups, and we meet like on a monthly basis, which is really just a wonderful time to just it's a mini reunion every time we join those things. Um, yeah, just getting involved, the VEDS movement, just educate yourself. There's so many wonderful resources that they're at your disposal there. Um, Finding your hospitals, building up your care team. I mean, there's really no rocket. I mean, it's not rocket science, but I will say it requires work. It's a lot of work. And unfortunately, what you have to understand is living with this life-threatening condition is that it's going to be work. Not only are you living the day to day and you have struggles in the day to day, but it's, at the end of the day, you've got to be your own advocate.
And it does feel like now versus back in 2019, and there had been some change in 2019 from when I was diagnosed in 2017 already, but it does feel like there are more resources to help in all of that now than there was before. So it's
Yeah.
like it's hard and it's
Yeah.
frustrating. To me, it feels less frustrating than it did even 3 years
Uh,
ago, and I hope that makes a difference for 3 years from now, right?
I think so. I mean, hopefully 3 years from now, it'll be even better, right? Like I think, where we're at today, just taking advantage of what we have right now can definitely, save your life. I think. I'll say one thing. The one of the wonderful things that we've had luck with. Unfortunately, I've heard of some people that haven't had luck with it, but there's that little VEDS emergency card, and
Mm-hmm.
we've been fortunate enough that whenever we present that, at the ER, that usually gets us back pretty quickly. I like to think it's the card, but also I'm really lucky. I've got my wife. I mean, Rachel is an amazing advocate. She's a firecracker. When she's in that situation, she really shines. And yeah, for some reason, she's got like this amazing gift that when she speaks, people kind of listen to her. And so I'm as a husband living with this condition, I'm really lucky to have an amazing advocate. And yeah, that's super lucky.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeremias, for coming back on and sharing your experience since 2019.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in today, and thank you, Jeremias, for coming back onto the show to share your experience over the last few years. In the beginning of this episode, I mentioned the prior interview with Jeremias back in 2019. I decided to link this in the episode show notes so you can find it really easily. If you're interested in hearing his story of his diagnosis and his family's diagnosis, you can find it there in the episode show notes. On the next episode on October 15th, we'll talk to Christy Gann, who was diagnosed after her son Hunter passed away last year after an aortic dissection. Don't forget to subscribe to the Staying Connected podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like this show, I hope you will consider sharing it with your friends on social media to help us raise awareness of vets together. You can also support the production of this podcast by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/translucent1. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon.